So I wanted to do something a little bit different this time around, because last time I made a poll asking you guys which cartoon you want me to talk about next on the channel. I ended up making that poll on Twitter, which the result of that poll happened to be Ed, Edd n Eddy. And this time around, I wanted to make a poll on YouTube because I never really made a poll on YouTube before. And I wanted to ask you guys the same question of which cartoon you guys want me to talk about next on the channel. And the options that I gave you guys was Adventure Time and Regular Show, because eventually down the line, I do plan on making a video talking about the both of them. I also mentioned Rugrats as well, Powerpuff Girls, and then of course the Jimmy Timmy Power Hour special, which we will eventually talk about on the channel as well. And the result of the poll, the one that got the most votes, was the Powerpuff Girls. So I'm having a lot of fun with these polls, so I'll definitely be doing a lot more of them in the future. But like I said, the series that happened to win that poll happened to be the Powerpuff Girls. And I'm honestly really excited to get into the Powerpuff Girls today, because the Powerpuff Girls, like if I had to pull aside a show that I had a lot of memories with, especially when it came to my grandma, it would have to be the Powerpuff Girls. So to give you guys a little story of my whole story with the Powerpuff Girls and my grandmother, pretty much, as you guys know already, I watched a lot of cartoons from Cartoon Network growing up. And one of those cartoons that I watch all the time was the Powerpuff Girls. And this cartoon as a whole was a cartoon that I watched with my grandma every single time. And my grandma's still around, thank God. I mean, I love my grandma so much. She's a great woman. But when it came to the Powerpuff Girls, I used to always chill in her room with the AC on, and me and her used to watch Powerpuff Girls whenever it was on the TV. And you can't really beat a show like the Powerpuff Girls. Like I said before, when it comes to those OG Cartoon Network shows, the Powerpuff Girls was definitely one of the best shows that was out there whenever Cartoon Network aired that throughout the week. So I had a lot of fun watching this. And that's something I can always look back at, and that's something I can always ask my grandma about, where I'm like, oh, hey, do you remember that time where me and you just sat down in your room watching Powerpuff Girls together? And she's probably going to say, yeah, that was a really fun time. That was a really good moment that we shared with one another. And I just really love the Powerpuff Girls just because it's a show where you follow these three girls that were made by a lab experiment, where you guys know how the theme song went. Sugar, spice, and everything nice. And because of that, we got three girls, which happens to be Bubbles, Blossom, and Buttercup. My personal favorite is Bubbles, mainly because she's very kind and she's sweet. And I've always just become like so attached to that character. That's why whenever I watched Powerpuff Girls, I was always looking forward to seeing what she was doing throughout that show. But you have these three girls where they go around town. They're superheroes, so they're protecting Townsville from all this danger from the various villains that you see in Powerpuff Girls, where you have the Rowdyruff Boys, which are essentially, they're just different variants of the Powerpuff Girls where they're boys instead of girls. And then you have the iconic villain in the series, Mojo Jojo. You got Sedusa, which, by the way, looking back at it, I never really knew that was her name, Sedusa. So that's actually pretty funny to think about. You have the Gangrene Gang, which was a group of people that were green and they went around causing a lot of trouble. You had Princess Morbucks, which was kind of like the Powerpuff Girls, where she was like so inspired to be like them and she wanted to become a superhero like them. And then instead of being a superhero, she ended up being a villain, and she's quite bitchy. And then you also have Buzzy Lumpkins, which was pretty much a redneck, and he was very funny to see throughout the show. And then of course you have him, which is honestly, besides Mojo Jojo, one of my favorite villains throughout the Powerpuff Girls. So the Powerpuff Girls has a lot of good villains in it, but Mojo Jojo and him definitely stand out to me. And since we're on the topic of him, oh yes, I honestly just wanted to do that for the point of the video. Might have been a little cringe, but hey, I just felt like doing that anyway, because he just like talks like so funny. I mean, it is in his character to talk like that, but it's just really funny just to do it in the video itself. But him, like I mentioned before, he was a very mysterious character, and I have to admit, he kind of creeped me out when I was a little kid, because when I saw him when I was watching the Powerpuff Girls, I was like, okay, who is this guy? Because when I initially looked at him, I didn't know what he was. Like, I was really trying to sit down and figure out, like, okay, what is this character? Like, what kind of creature is he? Is he like, you know, inspired by like some other creature in existence that I might not be knowledgeable on? But when I was looking at him, I was like, okay, it's the Lobster Man. That's practically what I called him when I was a little kid. Oh yeah, it's the Lobster Man. that talks like this. And I think that's just one of the things I liked about him, is the fact that he had a very interesting personality, the way that he interacted with the Powerpuff Girls. Obviously, he wanted nothing to do with the Powerpuff Girls, just like the rest of the villains throughout the series. But it's just his whole vibe. I really rocked with it, and I just really enjoyed him. And I still remember like that one scene throughout Powerpuff Girls where the Powerpuff Girls went over to his house to confront him, and all you see this dude doing is just casually just working out in his living room. Like, it's one of those things where it's like, okay, you know, the Powerpuff Girls probably want to come in contact with him because they want to see like, okay, what is this guy doing? Is he up to anything evil? And you just end up barging into his house, and then you just see him just casually working out in his living room. And it's just very funny how he's just having a casual conversation. He's not like all hype or anything. He's just talking to them normally, and he's just working out in his room. So he's like definitely one of my favorite characters throughout Powerpuff Girls. And then you also have to factor in Mojo Jojo, which is pretty much like the main villain throughout Powerpuff Girls, where he's always causing the most trouble. Or pretty much Mojo Jojo was experimented on, and he was a normal monkey at the time, but then eventually he became like this super powerful, smart monkey that created a lot of things, always tried to throw a lot of things at the Powerpuff Girls in order to stop them. But of course, in the end, the Powerpuff Girls managed to come out on top. And I just really liked him. I just liked his whole vibe. I thought he was funny. Always thought he was like fucking so funny every time he decided to talk all the time to the Powerpuff Girls. You know, just imitating his voice. That's one thing I could say about a lot of these Powerpuff Girls characters, is a lot of them had like some very funny voices that at least like stood out, where it's like, okay, if you hear this voice, you'll know who this character is, which I think the series did a good job when it came to like people like him and Mojo Jojo. Like, they just talked a certain way where you're like, okay, I know who this guy is. So I love Mojo Jojo. I mean, who doesn't love Mojo Jojo? He's an awesome character. And then of course you had the Rowdyruff Boys, which I also really enjoyed them as well, because I was always thinking in my head back then, before they were introduced, I was like, okay, what if we had like 3 boys that were just like Bubbles, Blossom, and Buttercup, that went around causing a whole bunch of shit as well? And then we ended up seeing something like that with the Rowdyruff Boys, where we had Brick, which was the variant of Blossom, and then of course we had Boomer, which was the variant of Bubbles. And then lastly, we had Butch, which was the variant of Buttercup. And pretty much Mojo Jojo created these versions of the Powerpuff Girls because they wanted to see if he could come up with somebody that could be at a similar power level that could compete with them, so he could put an end to the Powerpuff Girls as well. So just like how I've been going over for like these past couple minutes, the Powerpuff Girls have a lot of iconic villains throughout the series, and they're just really entertaining to see overall. But honestly, I want to talk about like the Powerpuff Girls themselves, because like I said, each of them are like different in their own way, where they're like, okay, you know, they stand out, where you could be like, okay, I like Bubbles, oh, I like Blossom, or I like Buttercup, because like I mentioned before, when it came to Bubbles, she's very kind, she's very sweet. Bubbles was essentially like one of those people that you came across where you're just like, oh my god, she looks so cute and innocent, she wouldn't hurt a fly. Then of course, you know, once it comes to a point where she gets mad, you know, she can definitely kick some ass. And then you, of course, you have Buttercup, which Buttercup in a way was also like another fan favorite, because she was tough. She honestly didn't really let people get in her way. She had a very serious nature, and she was always looking for a fight. Like, she was essentially like a hot-headed, she was just doing whatever that she wanted to do. And I just really love that about Buttercup, how she was so straightforward and she was always doing what she wanted. So whenever you had those moments where she was with the Powerpuff Girls and they were singing about like love, like if you guys remember that one episode where it's like the 3 of them playing instruments and they're singing like love, 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 like that whole song, it was just so weird to really see Buttercup like sing a song like that just based on her personality. But it's also really nice to see that side of her come out. And then of course we have Blossom, or who she's pretty much like the most mature one out of the group. She's composed, she's level-headed, and she's also the leader of the Powerpuff Girls. She's the one calling the shots. She's the one, as I mentioned, leading the group to make sure that everything is going according to plan. So each of these Powerpuff Girls have a unique personality that really makes them stand out, where you could be like, okay, I can really get behind this character. But like I mentioned before, when it came to a lot of these shows that came out on Cartoon Network during the late 1990s, a lot of these cartoons really stood out This show, I can honestly say, wasn't a show that was like overlooked by a lot of people, where not that many people really paid attention to. Like, a lot of people actually cared quite a bit about the Powerpuff Girls, and that's why it's one of the most iconic shows to come out of Cartoon Network. And when it comes to like the Powerpuff Girl reboot, I don't necessarily really care about that because, like I mentioned before, with several other things that I've talked about on the channel, especially with the most recent video that I talked about, talking about like how I'm not really that big of a fan when it comes to remakes of slasher films. Like I spoke about in the video, I talked about how I got into the Halloween franchise. When it came to like the Powerpuff Girls reboot, I was like, okay, do we really need this? Because my whole gripe with that is, if something isn't broken, then you don't have to try fixing it up and adding some new things to it. Like, I get at the end of the day, it's money. Like, it's a way to bring something back because, you know, a lot of people like it and you want to make more money. So, you know, obviously, since Powerpuff Girls is such a popular show, you know, people are going to want to tune in and watch the reboot. Obviously, I get it from a business perspective, but at the same time, just looking at it from my perspective, I'm like, okay, you don't have to fix something that's not broken, like the Powerpuff Girls the way it was all those years ago when it originally came out. And of course, when you had the Powerpuff Girls movie, and of course, when we had that original run, when it aired, and then when it ended around March of 2025, it's like, okay, you know, just leave it as it is, because it had 6 seasons. It was very enjoyable. And if you ever want to go back and just watch the original Powerpuff Girls, you can just go back and watch it. You don't have to like reboot the whole thing. But like I said, I get it from a money perspective, but I'm honestly not really a big fan of it, because just watching it, you know, it didn't really feel like Powerpuff Girls. Like, the vibes that we had of Powerpuff Girls before, it just didn't feel like Powerpuff Girls, like the one that we had prior, with a lot of the original crew there. And just because it's just so nostalgic at this point, you know, just watching something like that just felt a lot better compared to like the newer version of the Powerpuff Girls that we got nowadays. If you get what I'm trying to say, it's like, it's a lot different. Like, if you actually grew up with a show like this, you tagged along with it throughout your childhood, you would probably understand what I mean by that, where it's like, okay, watching this one feels a whole lot different compared to the original, because the original is just filled with so much nostalgia. And it's honestly really hard to beat the original. Like, it honestly takes a lot out of you to create something that could honestly even compete with like the original of that said series. And definitely when it comes to the Powerpuff Girls, the OG, in my personal opinion, is always going to be the best. But other than that, that's honestly all I have to really say about the Powerpuff Girls. Like, I'm honestly happy that you guys voted for this show for me to talk about on the channel, because I love Powerpuff Girls. It holds like a special memory when it comes to me and my grandma's relationship growing up when I was a little kid, where I used to watch it for her all the time. So I had a lot of fun talking about the Powerpuff Girls today. But now I want to ask you guys, how you guys feel about Powerpuff Girls? Do you guys have a favorite character? What is your favorite out of the 3 Powerpuff Girls? Or if you have anything overall to share about the Powerpuff Girls, just let me know in the comment section down below. And if you guys enjoyed this video, be sure to like and subscribe. I really appreciate it. And if you guys want to follow your boy on social media and see what I'm doing outside of the YouTube space, make sure to follow my Twitter, my Instagram, and my TikTok. It is located in the description below. As always, make sure to click on the bell for notifications. You guys are notified at all times whenever I upload a new video. But other than that, I hope all of you guys are having a fantastic day, wherever the day may be, if it's the daytime, the nighttime, or the evening. And I'll see you guys in the next video. As always, peace out.